Hello everyone, and hello Cosmere fans. We are 108 days away from December 6th and the release of Stormlight 5 Wind and Truth. And to sort of celebrate and get ready, I have decided to re-listen to the entire series on audio because I don't think I could get through books this chunky, this big in the amount in 108 days. 4 of them in 108 days. I don't think I could. So I am listening to them on audio. And I decided that I want to cover some of my favorite moments from the first 5 Stormlight Archive books. For those of you who are unaware and have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, the Stormlight Archive is an epic fantasy series written by Sanderson. It is the epic fantasy series of his. Like, the rest of some of his books and series, especially in the Cosmere, can fall under the epic fantasy category, but the Stormlight Archive is, like, the epic fantasy series. Large cast, huge, immense, deep world building. It's got everything an epic fantasy series needs to be epic. With the release of Book 5 in December, we will be halfway through the series, with 5 more still to go, although we will be waiting a while before we get Book 6. Curse you, Brandon! And let's see if I'm still cursing you by the end of Book 5. But anyway, I want to get into some of my favorite moments for the first 5 books. So, between now and December, I will be doing videos on the first 4 books, Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, Rhythm of War, and then eventually, maybe about a month or 2 after Stormlight 5 comes out, I'm going to be doing a video on 5 of my favorite moments from it as well. Now, obviously, this goes without saying, but major freaking spoilers for all these books. Especially this one that we're going to be covering right now, The Way of Kings. Again, these are just some of my favorite moments from the books. They're not in any particular order, although they're kind of sort of in chronological order, because that's just the way I did my notes. But again, these aren't, like, ranked in any way, shape, or form. I'm garbage at ranking stuff. Like, I could never do, like, top 10 lists and the 10 have any sort of frickin' meaning. Like, I'm garbage at it. So these are just going to be 5 of my favorite moments from Book 1 of the Stormlight Archive, The Way of Kings. And now, you may notice a bit of a theme with this list, and it's a theme that I noticed. The moments in this video are largely either big character moments or their imagery that I really like. But with all that in mind, let's not waste any more time, especially since I have a lot of talking to do when we get to moment 5. And let's go with the first moment that I have decided to title A Leaf, a Step Back, and a Demand. This moment involves one of the main characters of Stormlight Archive, Kaladin, who at this point in time in the book is a slave in High Prince Sadeas's army. He's one of his bridgemen, whose sole job is to, as a crew, run these bridges across what is known as the Shattered Plains It's this large landmass that is broken up by plateaus, and in between each of these plateaus is like just this giant labyrinth of chasms, canyons, that whole spiel. So their job is to run these bridges over the plateaus, drop them so the army can cross, and then keep running until they get to the desired plateau, normally for gem heart runs. Like, the army is after these creatures called chasm fiends, so that they can, kill them and get the gem hearts that grow inside these creatures, which are very valuable. We'll talk more about chasm fiends in a little bit. But what's important here is Kaladin used to be a soldier in a High Prince's army, but due to circumstances has been labeled both dangerous and a deserter, and these other labels that he most certainly is not, aside from dangerous. We'll get to that later in the video as well. But at this point in the book, Kaladin has seen the pointless deaths of dozens upon dozens of men in bridge runs. He's already lost his squad that was under his command when he was in a Bright Lord's army. I think I might have said High Prince earlier. If I did, I'm wrong. It was a Bright Lord. And one of these people that he lost reminds him of his brother Tien, who we later learn in the book that Kaladin also failed to protect and actually watched die in front of him. And again, combined with the betrayal from his light-eyed commander, who later, slaughtered the remains of his squad. He's just survived all of this. Kaladin deals a lot with depression and survivor's guilt. And at this point in the book, he has decided that he just can't take it anymore and walks off to the Honor Chasm, where bridgemen go to a long drop and sudden stop. Let's just put it that way, especially since I don't want to make YouTube mad at me. But before he can, he has had this creature that has been following him around, they're called Spren in the books. They're these miniature little beings that come into existence when there's strong emotion around, or just strong elements of existence in general. Like, there's Rot Spren, there's Glory Spren, there's Fire Spren. In this case, Kaladin believes she is a Wind Spren, who goes by the name of Syl. Excuse me. She had left for a time, and before he can step off into the chasm, she shows back up and she brings him a leaf that Kaladin had with him in the slave wagon at the start of the book. It is a poisoned leaf that he had contemplated using on the slave master, but for reasons earlier in the story, it had gotten crushed up and was unusable. And in Syl's mind, Kaladin was better. Like, he was in a better place, physically, mentally, she's not sure, when he had this leaf. So she went and got him another one, because she's trying to make him feel better, to bring him up out of this darkness that Kaladin experiences. And she's not entirely sure how, Like, when we first meet Syl, she's not all completely there in the head, because she has forgotten some things. She used to know things. She doesn't anymore, and she's learning the more and more time she spends with Kaladin. And so she brings in this leaf thinking that it will cheer him up and make him better. And of course she's not entirely sure what it is at first. She doesn't know that it's poison. And she just tried poison. She figures that out later, but, you know. And then he and Syl have this discussion where she points out that, you know, he thinks it's all hopeless. He can't protect them. They're dead men already. Why should he keep trying? They're all gonna die. And Syl points out, well, if they're dead already, what's the hurt in trying just one more time? Like, if they're already dead, it can't hurt to try to keep them alive. And she manages to convince Kaladin to give it one more try. So he backs up. He doesn't throw himself into the canyon, or chasm. I'm probably going to use that word interchangeably. And when he makes that decision, he turns around, he goes back to the barracks, and he runs into the bridge sergeant, Gaz, who him and Kaladin have not gotten along from minute one. And as Gaz is berating him for not even, you know, being able to go through with that, Cal walks up and, like, grabs him by the throat and tells him in no uncertain terms, no negotiating, that Bridge 4 is his. That he is Bridge leader. And that Gaz is going to stay out of his way. And that to me is just a powerful moment. Just Kaladin deciding to give it one more try. To find a reason to keep going. Our next moment is a little less depressing. And that it is the Chasm Fiend. Like I said, the high princes of this army that's on the Shatter Plains, who have come here to take vengeance against this different species of sentient beings that live on the planet Roshar, the Parshendi, for the murder of the king at the start of the book. They like to partake in Chasm Fiend hunts. Which, Chasm Fiends are these ginormous, like, 50-foot tall, armored monsters. If I could find a picture to show you, I would. Just Google Chasm Fiend. It's spelled exactly how it sounds. Just leave out the space between Chasm and Fiend. But they're these 50-foot tall, armored monsters that most ordinary weapons don't even touch. You basically need this special weapon that's known as a shard blade, which is these, like, 6 feet long great swords that, for magical reasons, are able to cut through rock and inanimate material, like, I even think, like, metal, like a hot knife through butter. And so they're the best weapon for fighting Chasm Fiends. In fact, if I remember correctly, Chasm Fiends exist in the Stormlight Archive because Brandon had seen something, I forget what it was, and he questioned, like, what would somebody have to fight to need a weapon that big? Like, he saw, like, some kind of, like, big anime sword somewhere. I forget where. And he's just like, what would you be needing to fight to have a weapon that big? And that's how we get the Chasm Fiends. But anyway, what begins as this ordinary hunt for Dalinar, another one of our main characters, High Prince Dalinar, I should say, and his sons Adel and Renarin and King Elhokar, quickly turns into horror and chaos, as the chasm being that they are hunting does not step up onto the plateau that they had tried to set up. No, it steps up onto theirs. So it's like towering over this entire group of people that has come for this hunt. And it's largely up to the soldiers, but mainly up to Dalinar, Adolin, and Elhokar, and I believe also Sadeas, who is wearing a charred plate and has these like gigantic, just like big ass like arrow things that might be able to punch through and hurt the creature. But it's mainly Dalinar, Adolin, and Elhokar who actually have, you know, these shard blades that can hurt the creature. Panic ensues. The three shard bearers do their best to fight the beast. Things go wrong. Elhokar's plate is severely damaged in what looks later like a sabotage attempt. And there's one image in this fight that strikes me the most, is that when, again, this like 30 to 50 foot tall monster like goes to like crush Dalinar, like he just like stands there and catches the monster's claw and is just fighting to keep this thing pushed back. And that's just an image that has always stuck in my head ever since I first read The Way of Kings, like, a couple years ago. Next, in our list of moments, moment number 3, we have the High Storm. Which, the High Storms are basically these magical storms, kind of like a hurricane, that goes across the planet every few days. They're based, like, the entire geography and flora and fauna, and even, like, society as a whole has built itself around trying to survive these storms. They're powerful. And, being left out, like, being caught outside in them is basically a death sentence. Which is what our boy Kaladin has to suffer when, after weeks of training and working with Bridge 4 to try and help them survive these bridge runs, Kaladin devises a tactic of taking the bridge that they have to carry, and instead of, you know, carrying it above their heads, so the Parshendi archers can just, you know, shoot at them, he decides that they're going to carry it on its side and block the arrows. It works. But then the Parshendi decide, oh, Bridge 4's not worth shooting at, let's shoot at all these other bridge crews who also try this method, but they're not trained and conditioned to be able to do this. So this particular plateau run that they're on just goes to shit. And it's a major loss for High Prince Sadeas' army. And, yeah, he's kind of pissed. In fact, the current, Bright Lord, who is in charge of the bridge crews, the one above Gaz, is killed for it. Kaladin is beaten and strung up outside of Bridge 4's barracks, because Sadeas understands why they would attempt to use this tactic to survive. But he still can't have it, because the way he runs the bridge crews, they're meant as a distraction. They're cannon fodder, so that the Parshendi ignore the actual soldiers. They're meant to die. Like, Sadeas is wasting dozens upon dozens of hundreds of lives just to keep his actual soldiers safe. A fact which Kaladin is, pretty peeved about when he thinks about it. But anyway, he's strung up on the barracks and left out in a high storm for the Storm Father to judge. It's a death sentence, like I said. But prior to the storm, the crew comes out and tells Kaladin, Taft, Rock, Moash, and others, they tell him, look, what you started with us is not going to die with you. Everyone that comes into Bridge Crew, we are going to teach them exactly what you have taught us. We are going to do everything we can to help them to survive. And Kaladin tells them something that I am actually going to read from the book itself. Let's see if I can find it. I want you three to do something for me, Kaladin said, closing his eyes against the blood trickling down his face from his lip, which he'd cracked open by speaking. Anything, Kaladin, Rock said. I want you to go back into the barrack and tell the men to come out after the storm. Tell them to look up at me tied here. Tell them I'll open my eyes and look back at them, and they'll know that I survived. He's gambling on the potential of him surviving. It's not impossible, but it's pretty much improbable that he'll live through this. Now, it's a desperate gamble, but he's trying to give his men hope, which the Bridgemen just lack. They're beaten down, they're treated like shit, to put it, not too fine a point on it. Again, they're expendable. They are treated less than the frigging leather boots on corpses that some bridge crews have to go down into the chasms and retrieve. So, we get a chapter of Kaladin enduring the high storm, which I'm not going to go too deeply into this. And when the bridge crew comes out, for all intents and purposes, Kaladin looks dead. And I'm going to read the passage describing him. There he saw what he'd expected and what he feared. The corpse looked like a hunk of slaughterhouse meat, skinned and bled. Was that a person? Kaladin's skin was sliced in 100 places, dribbles of blood mixing with rainwater running down the side of the building. The lad's body still hung by the ankles. His shirt had been ripped off, his bridgeman trousers were ragged. Ironically, his face was cleaner now than when they'd left him, washed by the storm. Teft had seen enough dead men on the battlefield to know what he was looking at. Poor lad, he thought, shaking his head as the rest of Bridge 4 gathered around him and Rock, quiet, horrified. You almost made me believe in you. Kaladin's eyes snapped open. And naturally, they're all like, holy shit, get him down, get him treated. And at this point in the story, Teft starts to suspect what's going on with Kaladin, how he might have survived. Especially after he finds one of the spears that they had left Kaladin as a sort of light so he could see in the high storm, and seeing that even though this spear, which gets its light from high storms, that was just out in one, the light's gone. So at that point, he starts to suspect that something's up with Kaladin, that he's special in some way. But, you know, that's for later on in the book. Now I can put it to the side since I'm not going to be reading any more from it. I learned my lesson from the Star Wars video. Our next moment is also a sort of Kaladin moment, but it's more of an imagery moment than it is like a character moment for Kaladin. We got one more big one of those. And if anybody watching this has read The Way of Kings, you could probably guess what it's going to be. But in this instance, this moment is one that if Stormlight ever gets adapted, I want to see this scene so badly. Just because I love the mental image that I get whenever I read this chapter. The moment is Wandersail. Kaladin, out on the plateaus, comes across somebody he's never met before. He's in a bit of a funk. He doesn't know how he's supposed to keep his men alive if they're all meant to die. He's contemplating trying to teach them how to fight, how to, like, maybe escape. And while in a sort of depressive funk, he just walks around in the camp area, and he meets somebody out on the Cheddar Plains. We have met this character early on in the book. A man who goes by the name of Wit. The King's Wit. Basically, a court gesture, but not as foolish. In fact, this Wit is wise in some areas. Cosmere-aware readers, and I believe it's actually mentioned at some point in the book, either before this or after this, I forget which. Cosmere-aware characters know this man, Wit, is the character of Hoid, who kind of makes cameo appearances here and there in the Cosmere. He's more actively involved in Stormlight than he is anything else. And Kaladin's first meeting with him is both confounding and philosophical. Much like Wit himself is. I'm not gonna lie, I love Wit. He is one of my favorite characters in the Cosmere. I mean, I'm gonna have to rearrange my desk. I mean, obviously, he's one of my favorites. But anyway, Wit proceeds to tell Kaladin a story using this sort of like haunting and melancholy music from a flute. And smoke from a campfire that Kaladin is like seeing images formed in the smoke that's sort of visually showing him the story that Wit's telling. And it's a story about, basically about, in the end, horrible things and responsibility. Or it's a story about nothing. Depends on how you want to look at it. This, like, just this image of Hoid telling the story, and I'm gonna go back and forth on calling him Wit and Hoid. They're the same person. Just this imagery of Hoid telling the story, and even the story itself, again, it's just something that has stuck with me ever since I read The Way of Kings. And I just find that image beautiful in a way. And I would just really like to know what kind of music that they'd have playing. I for whatever reason, I find just sort of like melancholy or even sort of like haunting kind of instrumental pieces, I find them to be freaking beautiful, if you want my honest opinion. But again, not really a whole lot that I'm going to mention on this scene. It's a lot more imagery based than it is the actual moment itself. Although Kaladin does get something out of this, which I feel like is sort of Hoyt's intent whenever he tells stories to people. And Hoyt has all sorts of philosophical musings when it comes to stories and why we tell them and why we like them. But we're not going to get into all that here. And lastly, we have moment number 5. Work with me here, computer. Here it is, folks. The big Sanderlanch, as it's called, where a lot of climaxes start. I'm gonna hate myself for this phrasing. Where a lot of climaxes start coming together all at once. Make your jokes in the comments. Strap in. We're gonna be here for a bit. It is the Battle of the Tower. The big fight at the end of The Way of Kings. Throughout the book, Dalinar has been becoming more and more frustrated with how this war is going. The High Princes have sort of turned it into a game to see who can win the most gem hearts, and it's becoming less and less about avenging their dead king. And quite frankly, Dalinar is both getting tired of it as a person, and also because he has been having visions during the high storms, telling that he needs to unite them. And in his mind, the way to unite the kingdom is to end this war. Either give up and go home, which is not the Alethi way, or to beat the Parshendi so bad that vengeance can be considered having gotten. So Dalinar manages to convince Sadeas into a joint attack on a plateau, the tower, that the Parshendi have always managed to push the Alethi forces back every time that they've gone there. They hope to wipe out, they estimate that there will be around 10,000 Parshendi troops. And allegedly the numbers of their army is only about 30,000 remaining after these 6 years of fighting. So they hope with this attack they can wipe out a third of the army that's left. While during this battle, we get another look at the Dalinar of old. Dalinar the warmonger, Dalinar the destroyer, the Blackthorn, the man who helped conquer basically all of Roshar. He slaughters dozens upon dozens, if not hundreds, of Parshendi in this battle, until he comes across what is the equivalent of a young adult Parshendi, and refuses to attack them. And then, as he surveys the carnage that's been left in the wake of this fight, he is disgusted with himself. And realizes that he has been acting in sort of contradiction of what the visions have been telling him to do. It's at this moment his son Adolin arrives and tells him that another massive Parshendi army is coming their way. And also points out that Sadeas' forces are leaving. They're retreating, and they're leaving Dalinar and his forces behind. They've been betrayed. Dalinar rallies his army for one final fatal assault, content in knowing that him and his men are not selfish, power and glory-hungry men like Sadeas. And his only regret is for his other son, Renarin, and the time that he did not get to spend with Navani. Meanwhile, During the retreat, Kaladin convinces Sadeas' forces to leave Bridge 4 behind, feigning exhaustion, and that they will catch up. His plan is to fall further and further behind, knowing that they're not going to stop for one bridge crew. And the idea is that the army is going to just get so far ahead that Bridge 4 will be able to escape. Most of them. Kaladin plans on going back to the camp to look after the wounded that they left behind in the barracks, and to sell the story that the rest of Bridge 4 were killed. The crew, however, refuses to leave him. They don't want to leave him behind. It's also during this time that Syl, the little windspren, this little translucent woman who has been talking to Kaladin, this spren, materializes at full human height. And she's staring out at the slaughter of Dalinar's army, and she's horrified. And at this point, she remembers that she is not a windspren. She is an honor spren. A spren of oaths and nobility. Kaladin is torn between wanting to just leave and get away from all these light eyes and their politics and their games that have left so many people that he's known killed. And wanting to go help Dalinar, even if it puts his men in danger. Like, he's torn between this. He screams in frustration, but eventually decides that they need to go back and try and save Dalinar. And the rest of the crew agrees. Dalinar sees Bridge 4 running back towards them, and on the slim chance that they can succeed and escape, the army charges through the Parshendi forces towards Bridge 4. Kaladin draws archery fire, because at this point he has started to notice that he has these abilities when he's able to draw Stormlight into his body. And he also earned a reputation of antagonizing the Parshendi when he went out wearing armor made from Parshendi carapace, and, basically using Parshendi corpses as armor and shields. So they kind of don't like him. He draws archery fire away from Bridge 4, but Syl warns him of another attack by another group of archers who are about to hit Bridge 4 from their unprotected side. Kaladin unleashes a wave of Stormlight power that brings all the arrows onto his shield, which then, shatters. But this freaks the Parshendi out, and they leave. These ones, anyway. But this leaves Kaladin exhausted and unable to fight. Moash takes the lead to try and help Dalinar's forces. And while dragged back to rest, Kaladin remembers the day that his brother Tien died. Seeing his men about to face basically unarmed and unarmored, borderline unarmed and unarmored, this massive Parshendi force, Syl asks him if he knows the words. Refusing to sit and watch his men die again, Kaladin picks up his spear and launches himself at the Parshendi. He draws Stormlight from the gems woven into their beards and unleashes an explosion of power as he lands. And it's there that Kaladin utters the second ideal of the Windrunners, one of the 10 orders of the Knights Radiant. I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. Dalinar notices that the bridgemen are beginning to fight. Largely, this is Kaladin just chewing his way through the Parshendi forces. And he orders Adolin to assist them. It's then that Dalinar is attacked by a Parshendi shard bearer, a figure that has not been seen before, and the two battle it out. During that battle, Adolin and his forces break through the Parshendi lines to Bridge 4, but Adolin continues to fight. Kaladin starts ordering the men across the bridge and fights toward Adolin, who can order the rest of them to retreat. Adolin refuses to leave his father behind, but Kaladin promises to go save Dalinar if Adolin will retreat with the rest of his men. Adolin grudgingly does so. As Dalinar is nearly defeated by the Parshendi shard bearer, it speaks to him. Kaladin arrives, still fueled by Stormlight, and saves Dalinar. The display of his power causes the Parshendi to pause and to sort of back away. As Dalinar orders the retreat, the Parshendi shard bearer salutes them. The Sanderson ends there, but the aftermath of this is also a fantastic moment, and I think it needs included. Dalinar confronts Sadeas about the betrayal, and on the way back to camp, Dalinar promised Kaladin that he would free Bridge 4 from Sadeas' service. Kaladin has had zero great experience with the Light Eyes. The man that was put in charge of his home village, the Bright Lord who was in charge of the army that got his men killed, slaughtered them actually, to cover up a lie, and then of course Sadeas being a total piece of shit. Dalinar demands the release of Bridge 4. Sadeas refuses every offer of wealth that Dalinar offers. He very much plans to punish Bridge 4 for saving Dalinar. Kaladin loses hope, thinking Dalinar is really no better than the other Light Eyes he's encountered. Until Dalinar summons his legendary blade, Oathbringer. Everyone thinks that it's about to come to blows between Dalinar and Sadeas, until Dalinar stabs the blade into the ground and offers it up to Sadeas in exchange for all of the bridgemen. Not just Bridge 4, all of them. 1,000 lives for this one sword. These swords have been, kingdoms have risen and fallen because of these swords. So Sadeas greedily agrees. One sword for 1,000 useless men? Sure. But it gives Kaladin hope that maybe there are still good people in the world, and that Dalinar just might be one of them. That there is still a bit of honor left in the men of Roshar. And with that, that is my 5 of my favorite moments from The Way of Kings. It'll probably be sometime in September before we get to Words of Radiance. That one's going to be a tough one to narrow down, because there are just so many good moments in Words of Radiance. I can already think a couple off the top of my head. But that's for another video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I hope I've inspired anybody who hasn't read the book and ignored the spoiler warning to go ahead and go get the book. It is a wonderful read. The Stormlight Archive has quickly become one of my favorite book series of all time, even with it being unfinished. so far. And it's actually one of the first, or not first, it's one of the last of Brandon's Cosmere works that I started. Like, I had read Elantris, Warbreaker, all of Mistborn Era 1. I think I might have even read most of Mistborn Era 2 before I started reading Stormlight. Just because I had heard that it's the one that people put down the most. Like, they just stopped that one the most. And it is essentially jumping into the deep end of Brandon's works. The book starts, like, this book has 3 prologues. 3 prologues! But the minute I started reading it, just something in me clicked with this book. And I knew I was holding something special. And it has continued to remain special to me. Anyways, now I'm done with this video. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And remember, everyone, life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. I will see you all next time.